Hello, folks. Welcome to Dangerous Ideas. I am Lee Camp, still the most censored comedian, journalist, whatever you want to call me in America, but certainly not the most censored in the world because there are journalists and comedians being executed on a regular basis in other countries. And anyway, I thought I'd start off with, by the way, I have a great interview later for you. Author Arnold August, who was recently detained at airport of Montreal for his writing, for his journalism, for his book writing, for covering the reality of Palestine, of Gaza. And we're going to talk to him, but we'll also be talking to him about Cuba, which he writes a lot about, and so much more. That's coming up in just a half hour or so. But before we get to that, I have a lot to cover, and I wanted to just start off with this. This is how bad Israel is losing the propaganda war. Like, how crazy it's gotten, how horrific Israel is. It has gotten to the point that they've lost people like Clarissa Ward. Clarissa Ward is, as I've shown on this show before, a longtime correspondent or reporter for CNN, has largely never seen a war crime by the United States that she wasn't just a huge fan of. She has really gone above and beyond to make sure she facilitates the massacres that the United States is behind around the world. And she's done that for, I don't know how long she's been at CNN, but it could be 20 years for all I know, 15, 10 maybe. Long time, well known. Her, perhaps on her greatest hits, one of the most recent ones was she created the fake scenario at the Syrian prison where she was just walking around with the Syrian rebels who had just taken over Syria, and they happened upon this prisoner in Assad's dungeons that nobody had released. And what? Oh my goodness, there's a guy there, and we need to help him. And it turned out later that he was a long time spy chief or worked for the spy department of Assad, and was a higher up in the Assad military structure, and they pretended that he was something else, and it's just crazy. And of course everyone with half a brain cell knew it was fake because they were pretending to shoot the lock off the cell, which can ricochet and kill camera people nearby, but that didn't seem to bother them. So many issues. So that's her. That's the type of shit she does. Israel has lost Clarissa Ward in their propaganda. Here she is talking about the journalists that were just killed the other day, the Al Jazeera journalists. And here she is talking about this.
I woke up this morning to the horrific news that Anas al-Sharif, the Al Jazeera journalist, and 3 of his colleagues were killed in a targeted Israeli strike inside Gaza. This brings the total number of journalists killed in Gaza since October 7th to 176, which is, frankly, a mind-boggling statistic. And I just wanted to say, and I realize that it helps nobody, but I think I speak for a lot of Western journalists when I say that so many of us feel angry and outraged and powerless and ashamed. We are confronted with a stream of accusations from the IDF that seek to dehumanize our Palestinian colleagues, that seek to justify their killings, and the nature of the carefully calibrated language that we are using in our stories, I understand to many just feels so detached and so not proportional to the agony and outrage of the moment. And behind the scenes, many of us continue to push and press and sign letters and write petitions and do meetings, and none of it seems to make a damn bit of difference. So just a reminder that journalism is not a crime, and that the targeting of journalists is a war crime.
Now, of course, what she does is not journalism.
I woke up this morning to the horrific news.
what she does is not journalism, but the insults of Clarissa aside, which is tough for me to put them aside, but they've even lost her in the propaganda as they commit this genocide, as they massacre. She said the number of journalists comes to 179. I've heard over 200 from many sources that have been murdered by Israel during this genocide. And to lose a stenographer for the State Department like her is kind of crazy. A month ago, she was also on the Colbert show and said some similar things about what a horror show it is in Gaza. And this is all showing how crazy what Israel's doing and how they're losing the propaganda war. Again, to lose someone like this, like a CNN State Department. State Department has their hand up her ass kind of puppet is pretty amazing. And I think someone mentioned in the chat, she, I believe, also was one of the reporters who claimed that they could, like after the Syrian chemical weapon photo op, she went and smelled things and said, "Oh yeah, I can tell these are chemical weapons." And they were also throwing around that it might be sarin, but of course, if you were to smell sarin, you would instantly not be having a good day. So it was all laughable, and that's the type of shit she does. And the other thing that's kind of funny is that she doesn't realize that by manufacturing consent for endless U.S. empire, destruction of life, gutting of humanity, destruction of this planet in all these other theaters of war, she actually has helped lay the groundwork for this genocide in Gaza. Whether she's supporting that genocide right now or not, she is a key figure who has helped lay the groundwork for what we're seeing in Gaza. And so, but she didn't realize that. She just says, let's not kill journalists. But anyway, my real point here is just how severely Israel is losing this propaganda war. They have begun their build up for their now invasion of Gaza, and there is a slight difference. I know it's kind of like, hasn't Gaza been occupied for 2 years now or more? Hasn't Gaza been attacked and genocided? For the difference is really just how many Israeli troops are in Gaza, and so they're preparing for a large scale occupation of Gaza. Even in NBC News, you're talking about satellite images show Israel building up forces for ground invasion of Gaza. And they show some of these satellite images. And that is Israel's next step, is a much more large scale invasion of Gaza. But what I really wanted to spend some time on, though, is what's been going on with Ukraine and Trump and Zelensky and Putin, and get to all that before we have our guest coming in here. So let's do that. Please click thumbs up, click share. Oh, and since I mentioned it, I will use it as a segue. The Syrian chemical weapons hoax. You might have, if you watched Unredacted Tonight, I did a kind of longer form segment on it several weeks ago, because a new book, I know, if you just say Syrian chemical weapons, people go, isn't that like several years ago old news? But a book has just come out by Ian Henderson, one of the lead investigators, one of the lead OPCW whistleblowers. That came out a few months ago. So I read that book, and I did this kind of longer form unredacted segment on it to reveal all of the details of the Syrian hoax, the Syria scam that allowed us to collapse their government, collapse that nation, kill hundreds of thousands, if not millions, with starvation and our sanctions against them. And anyway, I have now put up a column. I know some people prefer this type of material in column form. So this is a column based on that segment. So if you want to read that, and, it's kind of nice to know all the details of the Syria hoax that I've been talking about for years now. And we now have all those details because of this new book by Ian Henderson. So check it out. It's at substack.com/Lee Camp or Real Lee Camp. I don't know. I can't. I can't keep track of all this stuff, and I'm sure you can. But anyway, you go to substack.com/@realleecamp. That will take you straight there. Free to read. I'd love for you to share it. The other day, I was again on Substack trending in the world politics category. So hopefully you can help get the old Substack back into the world politics leaders board, because that's how I define my self-worth. Do you understand? That's all I have is that leaders board on Substack. So it'd be awesome if you could promote that, because seriously, all I have. Okay, but let's keep moving here. As you know, Trump met with Putin, which, all the the liberal media like CNN and MSNBC, this shows what scams they are, what grifters they are, what charlatans they are. They act like the fact that Trump met with Putin, right? If you just go in the vicinity of Putin, you are somehow taken over by his brain virus, and therefore you cannot speak to leaders that you disagree with or that the U.S. empire is at odds with. You can't speak to them because if you get in the same room as them, they will infect you, and then like fungus grows out of your head and you just become a zombie thing. That is apparently what the media will tell you. If you turn on a panel at CNN, it's like Putin just overtook him and his brain melted and oozed out his ears. And ironically, if you watch the right-wing media, they're not saying that now, right? But that is what they said back when Obama would meet with foreign leaders that we were somewhat at odds with. If he met with Putin, which he did, or something like that, or he met with Xi, it was like Obama's brain has been captured by the enemy, and now they don't say that, because now it's Trump. They support Trump, therefore now Trump has a secure brain and he can handle a meeting with Putin. It's also stupid. It's like, if you want to solve these world problems, you should want all of these leaders to meet with each other, all of them. Now, I'm not going to argue that Trump is a bright man. I don't think he knows. Even though Putin has tried to educate him multiple times, I don't think he knows the history of Ukraine. I don't think he knows the history of the U.S. Creating a coup in Ukraine. I don't think he really understands how it's a proxy war so much. Maybe partially. I think he does understand that we're trying to separate Russia from China, but that has completely backfired. Anyway, today, Trump has Zelensky there, although it sounds like much of his meeting with Zelensky was Zelensky sitting there while Trump talked about like trans athletes and how all male voting is fraud, even though probably millions, I don't know the exact numbers, of people voted by mail for Trump. So was all that fraud? No, actually, the computer voting machines are far more fraud than the mail voting, but because that actually has paper that can prove you voted. But anyway, he doesn't want people to mail in their ballots because that tends to favor Democrats. So he's trying to call it all fraud and stop it, etc. But Zelensky was here, and not only is Trump, as anyone with half a brain on Ukraine said for a while, Trump is now pushing the idea that some territory is going to have to be ceded to Russia in order to end this proxy war. Zelensky says absolutely not. And if that is to happen, if that were to happen, if they were to give the Donbass region to Russia and then it ends the proxy war, it would be what many of us were saying for years, since day one. Like, oh, this is going to end at a peace table with some sort of negotiations. So do we need to kill 1 million people before we do that? Oh, no, we're not there yet. So yeah, just keep killing everybody. That's great. On both sides, absolutely. Let's just keep massacring people. One day we'll sit down at that table and we'll agree to one of these things. But right now, let's just keep murdering everybody. And yet we're called, Russian agents or whatever the fuck they want to call us for saying the thing that will ultimately happen. But this goes along at the same time with the fact that support for this war by Ukrainians even by Ukrainians, has just collapsed. It is plummeted. On October 7th, polling giant, and this is at Sheer Post, polling giant Gallup published the remarkable results of a survey of Ukrainians. Public support for Kiev fighting until victory has plummeted. I think most people know that's not a thing. Everyone other than Sean Penn knows that Ukraine can continue to delay this for a long, long time, it seems, as long as they get weapons from the U.S. and Britain. But they're not winning. No one, I've never heard anyone with a military mind say that the Ukraine's going to win this. And the U.S. ruling elite, even the ones who started this proxy war, you know, they don't think Ukraine's going to win. They just want to see it harm Russia as much as possible, draw down their men, draw down their munitions, hurt their economy, sanctions on them, hurt their energy resources, blow up the Nord Stream. That's what they sought. And they got a lot of it. They also, probably a lot of these ruling elite wanted to steal a lot of Ukraine, which they've succeeded in doing. I mean, American ruling elite. More land in Ukraine has been sold off to multinational corporations since the beginning of this war than has been captured by Russia. So, technically speaking, in this war, the U.S. and multinationals, corporate America, corporate West, has gotten more Ukraine land than Russia has. That's the real winner. And resources, etc. Anyway, public support for Kiev fighting until victory has plummeted to a record low across all segments of the population, regardless of region or demographic group. In a nearly complete reversal from the public opinion in 2022, 69% of citizens favor a negotiated end to the war as soon as possible. Just 24% of Ukrainians, these are the ones ostensibly we're supposed to support, right? If you ask your average American, why are we supporting you? They go, poor Ukrainians. We got to help the poor Ukrainians. That's why we're in there, poor Ukrainians. So if you care about the Ukrainians and you want to do what the Ukrainians want to do, well, if you're saying fight forever, then you are with 1/4 of Ukrainian population. That is all that's left that supports the just keep fighting, just keep killing all of our people. Vanishingly few in Ukraine believe the proxy war will end anytime soon. The reasons for Ukrainian pessimism on this point are unstated, but an obvious explanation is the intransigence of President Zelensky, who's also, as you guys well know, surrounded by Nazis. So it's tough to know how much is him speaking and how much is his Nazi friends who say basically we'll murder you if you end this war. How much is it them speaking? I mean, he is a puppet, so are we hearing from the puppeteers? Is that what's going on here? Zelensky, encouraged by his overseas backers, Britain in particular, London's reverie of breaking up Russia into readily exploitable chunks dates back centuries and became turbocharged in the wake of the February 2014 Maidan coup that was created, directed, stage managed, funded by the U.S. and the CIA was there at the time. In July that year, even the New York Times has admitted that. In July of that year, 2014, a precise blueprint for the current proxy conflict was published by the Institute of Statecraft, a NATO MI6 cutout founded by veteran British military intelligence apparatchik Chris Donnelly. Ukrainians support negotiated peace, and here are the numbers. If you're looking at the chart right now, it shows how severely these numbers have switched. When this war started, when this proxy war started, technically in 2022, it actually started earlier than that, but 2022, only 22% or so of Ukrainians said that they wanted to seek a negotiated ending to the war. Now that's at 69%. 2022, roughly 4% said Ukraine should continue fighting until it wins the war. Now that's down at 24%. In response to the Donbass civil war, which started in way back 2014 or so, Statecraft advocated targeting Moscow with a variety of anti-subversive measures. This included economic boycott, breach of diplomatic relations, as well as propaganda and counter-propaganda, pressure on neutrals. The objective was to produce armed conflict of the old-fashioned sort with Russia, which Britain and the West could win. While we are now witnessing in real time the brutal unraveling of Donnelly's monstrous plot, Anglo-American designs of using Ukraine as a beachhead for all that war with Moscow date back far further. This has been a long-time plot to make Russia suffer and hopefully split up Russia. But anyway, that's what's going on. Trump also, why is Trump doing this now? Well, part of it is to distract from Epstein, which it finally seems to be working a little bit. He declared martial law in D.C. Now he seems to be backing off of it slightly. He, had a meeting with Putin. He's had a meeting with Zelensky. He's throwing all this shit at the wall to cover up the Epstein files. And now, finally, a lot of the media seems to be moving on, like, all right, I guess we'll talk about other things. But I want to talk about, and this is an easy segue here, I want to talk about continued de-dollarization and the rise of BRICS. Trump's tariffs are already backfiring. And the segue here is that part of the reason for the proxy war in Ukraine was to separate Russia from China, which it has had the complete opposite effect, as opposite as it could have. They are now closer than they've ever been. But Trump's tariffs, and this is something I've been saying a lot that very few have been talking about, but Trump's tariffs at the heart, yeah, it's to get some money for the U.S. Yeah, it's to hold on a second here. I think I'm gonna turn this may cause me to cut out for 1 second, but all right. Hopefully I'm back. But yes, it was to get some money for the U.S. Yes, it was to offset some of the trillions of dollars of tax cuts for the rich. But I've been saying for a while now, at the heart of it is actually the fact that the dollar is crumbling and the world is de-dollarizing. And Trump's hoping that these tariffs force a lot of these countries back into an underling position underneath the U.S. and he can force them to do a little more of what he wants rather than de-dollarizing. It can basically be a threat, right? We'll give you 50% tariffs, which for a lot of countries is a crushing blow. 50% tariffs, unless, you stop being so cozy with China, you stop selling your oil to China in yuan or some other currency, you stop buying oil from Russia, those kind of things, then we'll lower that tariff rate to 12% or something. And so, that is the main goal of the tariff war, has to do with de-dollarization. And of course, without the powerful petrodollar, the U.S. can't just print all the money we want. We wouldn't have $1 trillion a year military. We would not be nearly the massive empire we are. So these things are all connected, but most people don't want to talk about it. One place that has been talking about it plenty is excellent, Ben Norton's excellent site, geopoliticaleconomy.com. But here is one area of how Trump's tariffs are backfiring. India is actually moving closer to China, and it's strengthening BRICS unity. Rather than, Trump was hoping that he could rip India apart from China, and there were some signs that that's where things might be headed, but it seems to be doing the opposite already. His tariff war is already backfiring. Ironically, the article says, Trump's attacks on BRICS countries have only strengthened BRICS and encouraged more and more countries to join the Global South-led organization. Trump has blatantly meddled in the internal affairs of Brazil. I did a segment on Brazil last week about Trump's war against Brazil, partially because he loves Bolsonaro, who's now imprisoned on house arrest, but that's really kind of a bit of a sideshow. It actually has to do with the fact that Brazil is one of the leaders of BRICS, one of the leaders of de-dollarization. Those are the things that Trump and the ruling elite of the U.S. empire are really concerned about. Trump is a close ally of Brazil's far-right leader, Bolsonaro. To hurt its current left-wing president, Lula da Silva, Trump imposed 50% tariffs on the South American nation. Now, I'm sure if Lula were to say, hey, you know what? We'll quit being in BRICS and we won't follow, de-dollarization, Trump would not have 50% tariffs on them. So he would throw Bolsonaro under the bus for a second. In a second, if Brazil were to leave BRICS, but they're not doing that. This has resulted in Brazil deepening its already close ties with China, and President Lula is publicly calling for BRICS countries to create alternatives to the U.S. dollar. Another example of this is how the U.S. president has treated India, which is the I in BRICS, in case you weren't sure. For years, the U.S. government has pursued a strategy of allying with India against China as part of an attempt to divide BRICS and isolate Beijing. In recent years, especially under right-wing Prime Minister Modi, India has gradually moved closer to the U.S. But in his second term as president, Trump has attacked India, threatening it with 50% tariffs, one of the highest rates in the world. Trump apparently thinks that India has no choice but to go along with whatever the U.S. wants. But the world is increasingly multipolar, and New Delhi does have other options. In response to Trump's very aggressive tariffs, what did India do? It reached out to China with an olive branch. Here's the thing, folks. I got to say, this is where I support Trump, and I think he's doing a bang-up job. He is getting the rest of the world to ally, to work together, to have diplomatic ties. He is uniting the world outside of the United States. And to me, it's beautiful. That's what the world needs, right? We need a bunch of countries, powerful countries, to start working together more. And Trump is achieving that. Not with him, just with each other, because they're horrified by what a lunatic he is. So, good on him. Like, good on him. I've never seen a U.S. president get so much of the world to work together. So Trump is actually pushing India and China closer together. This is exactly what Washington has been trying to prevent for well over a decade. The U.S. even managed to bring India into the so-called Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, or Quad, alongside Japan and Australia. It's widely known that Quad sought to isolate and weaken China in the Pacific region. But Trump's tariffs are now doing precisely the opposite. Sounds like they pulled their quad. See what I did there? See what I did? That's right. Killer comedy show here. These contradictory, self-destructive policies have led critics in China sarcastically to refer to Trump, I'm not going to pronounce this correctly, but as Guo, meaning Trump the nation builder. Except the nation that he is helping to build, is not the U.S., it's China. Good for you, Trump. Trump's a uniter. I've been saying this. He is uniting the rest of the world, and it's a beautiful thing to see. All right, in a few minutes, or after the interview, I will probably bring you a little more on BRICS and the complete backfiring of Trump tariffs. But I want to get to our excellent interview. And it would be great, everybody, if you could click thumbs up, click subscribe. I know I'm crazy suppressed, but it still helps. Even if you are already subscribed to the YouTube channel, click the little caret next to the thing and change your bell setting to always alert to get all the alerts. And the other thing was, new Substack column is over there at substack.com/@RealLeeCamp. I'd love for you to, it's free to subscribe over there. I mean, you can also become a paying member, but it's free to subscribe over there. And I'd love for you to subscribe there if you haven't already, for free. But okay, let me get to our distinguished guest, who, unlike the last time I was trying to see him, is actually able to attend this time. I was invited by him, and it was very kind of him to invite me to an event at the Cuban embassy this past week. It's been 99 years of Fidel Castro. This would be his 99th birthday. And so they had an event, and Arnold August, the author and journalist, was going to be the keynote speaker. But we get there at the Cuban embassy. And by the way, if you need a reminder of what the Cuban embassy is up against in the United States, I used to live near there for several years. And when I lived there, it was shot up by a lunatic. So they still have bullet holes in their columns and bullet holes in the statue out front from when a guy drove by and opened fire at the edifice of the Cuban embassy. We're really together here in the United States. We really, you know what? We have our priorities set and we follow those priorities. And that's what I like about us. But anyway, excellent event, heavily attended. And yet the keynote speaker was not there because he was not allowed to leave Canada. He was held at the airport for over 6 hours. So please welcome Arnold August.
Thanks for having me, Lee.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I want to hear about your new book in a few minutes, but I want to start off with your experience. And apparently, I didn't realize at the time, apparently this is not a new experience for you, being held at the airport. But you live in Montreal, and you were trying to fly to D.C. to talk about your new book, talk about Cuba, and they wouldn't let you do that. And can you talk about what they did to you, and also what were the questions that they were grilling you on for 6 hours?
Well, it actually goes back a long time to 2014 when I was about to leave the Montreal airport to New York for a New Left Forum doing a presentation on Cuba. And I was stopped there in the airport by the customs, asking me a lot of questions why I'm going to New York, about Fidel Castro, what's my view of Cuba and all that. And, I said, well, of course, the reason they gave for holding me back is I had a criminal record going back to 1972, 74. What was that? They were all political. I was arrested for example, handing out leaflets. You might know that story. You're handing out a leaflet on the corner, and then the police say, well, you have no right to do so. You say, yeah, we have a right. Then you're arrested for obstructing police, things like that. I spent some time in jail, a few months, and then it was all over.
And the authorities are always not letting people fly on airplanes because they handed out leaflets 40 years ago. That's quite common.
Yeah, I know. But what happened was, it's pretty funny, I think, is that like back in 2014, when I was trying to enter New York, I said, look, come on, that was 4 decades ago. Don't tell me it's about my criminal record of being arrested for handing out leaflets. It's obviously my political views. They denied that. Now, I went to New York. I was able to go there. But who would have thought 10 years later that I would, for example, in the Montreal airport, flying from Montreal to New York City to attend an event on the 75 years of China. They stopped me there. Also with regards so-called my criminal record, I said again, come on, 5 decades later, that's not the reason. Tell me the real reason. They refused to acknowledge the real reason, that is for my political views. But what I liked about the last thing they did against me, Montreal airport on August 13th, to go to that event that you mentioned, was for the first time they admitted that has nothing to do with 72, 74. Said, no, they had all the documents there. And they said, no, it's not about that. And the first thing the guy asked me, you wrote an article in support with regard to George Labat, who was returned to Beirut, Lebanon, after spending 41 years in prison in France. That was the first thing. He said, I Googled your name. This is what I found. And they asked me other questions as well with regards to my relationship with Marwa Assam, which is who's a very well-known Beirut journalist. Now, in that five hours I was there were 2 parts to it. The first part was he Googled my name to find out what I was writing about. And the only thing he was interested in was the question of Palestine. Press TV. They said, you are apparently a regular guest on Press TV in Iran. Yes. Do you know that the United States has sanctions against Press TV because we consider it to be a terrorist organization? Yes, I do. I know, but I do so anyways. Then they took my iPhone away. They confiscated. They don't ask you. They just, well, give me your iPhone. They scanned it for an hour and a half, and they came back with another series of questions. You seem to have a lot of exchanges with Mara Assam in Beirut. What they were referring to is that when the leader of Hezbollah in Lebanon was assassinated by the U.S. Israeli forces, she was extremely impacted by that loss. And I sent her a tweet, a message that I cannot attend the funeral. You are going. Please keep me in your thoughts when you are attending the funeral. They quoted that message that I sent to her that they scanned from my iPhone. These are the type of things, everything, the scanning of the iPhone was all geared towards Palestine. From the question, if they saw the word Palestine, if they saw Arabic or Farsi writing, that captured their attention.
Right.
So bottom line is, it's different from 10 years ago, but now the issue was Palestine. There was no doubt about it. At least the guy was honest enough to say it's not about anything previous. It's about Palestine. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, it sounds like they've stopped trying to cover up their real motives.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable, and I don't. And they say to you like, well, because you have written on Palestine, spoken to people, you can't get on this plane.
Exactly. That's what it was. Well, the actual wording, I don't have, the actual wording is, we are not assured that by entering the United States, you are working against the interests of the United States. That's their basic thing. Because of my support for, and I openly said, when they asked me, I said, yeah, I fully support the resistance. I support Hezbollah. I support Hamas.
Right.
I support Iran. Of course, I said that, you may know when you have these interrogations, I was under oath, by the way, to tell the truth. I told the truth, because if you don't tell the truth, they will catch you on a lie. And instead of dealing with the real issue, you said this, but this is really what happened. So I told the truth. But additionally, I was very proud to say it. I told
Yeah.
and so it was very clear that was the reason. Palestine.
Do you know, or since this happened before, do you know, or have you spoken to lawyers about what would happen if you refused to speak?
Yeah, I spoke to, after the first attempt to stop me from going a few years ago, I spoke to a very well-placed human rights lawyer in Montreal, who I know from my years at McGill University in 1968, 69. He sees it very hard for him to do anything. What he suggested was to ask for a pardon for my 1972-74 criminal record. I mean, he was a nice guy, but that's what he suggested. So, okay, I looked at that pardon conditions. There was no way I would sign it, because it would be tantamount to say, okay, I was bad in the past, I'll be a good boy now. So I've refused to ask for a pardon. And so, but in any case, I'm happy I did, because it had nothing to do with 72-74. It has everything to do with Israel. Like the litmus point, there's a major, in my view, a major, important schism that is taking place in the world today on the issue of Palestine. Where does one stand? And you want to hear something funny? I know you like. I'll give you some food for a comedian. After this whole thing went down, it was about 5-6 hours, right? This guy face to face with this guy. He was very nice and polite, by the way, Mr. White. It was all over. Okay.
Is this U.S. authorities or
yeah, U.S.
Canadian?
Yeah. I mean, I sent you the picture. So that's another thing, So supposedly the Canadian government is fighting against the attempt to make Canada the 51st state, but they have the immigration right in the airport. So Canada, in my view, is already a de facto 51st state.
Yeah.
But what was funny, I think you may appreciate it, is that I asked him, after all of these, 5 hours face-to-face confrontation on the issue of Israel himself in American uniform, myself supporting the resistance. I said, but you and I, off the record, what is your view about what is happening in Palestine? What is happening in Gaza? I was really surprised. You know what he said? I was expecting to say, no, we fully support Israel against the terror. He said, I'm neutral. I don't support either side. So that, to me, Lee, this indicates that the United States and Israel are really losing their narrative when their own men in uniform cannot say that they support U.S. and Israel against Palestine. That was the positive thing of that.
I thought he was gonna give, you know, the Nazi response. I don't care. I'm just following orders.
No, he didn't say that.
Yeah.
He was quite polite.
I mean, I don't know if it's a new level of rights being taken away or not, but to have the authorities, to have the DHS or whatever saying you can't come to the country because you've written things we don't like. I don't know that I've heard a lot of that before recently, but
coming into the United States from Canada, I think it's the first case, but there have been previous similar cases. For example, Richard Medhurst going into the UK.
Oh yeah, in UK,
he was held up. But as far as Canada into the U.S.,
not just held up. They raided his house and everything.
They raided his house, and so I think it's the first time with regards to the United States and Canada. So we'll see where we'll go from here. It has to be raised publicly. I'm happy that you're having me on your show to initiate discussion on this thing, which I think is a very bad precedent, not only for me, for anyone from Canada who has political views that oppose the status quo and wants to travel to the United States.
So let's talk about a little about Cuba and your new book, and what you were planning to say at the Cuban embassy if you'd been allowed to actually travel.
Well, what I was planning to say is the following. It was that, firstly, not August 13th, as you mentioned, the 99th anniversary of the birth of Fidel Castro. Why, in my view, he is a giant, still is a giant because he passed away, but his ideas are still there. And I was going to develop 2 points. My first point was that having met Fidel Castro for a very short period of time in 2000, and then against 2001, in 2000, the situation was the following. The context is as follows. In the year 2000, there was a major summit of Americas that took place in Quebec City. The Battle of Quebec City took place where demonstrators from the United States, Canada, and Latin America went to Quebec City to demonstrate against the Free Trade of Americas Pact that was supposed to be adopted at this time. Okay? And amongst the speakers there was the Prime Minister of Canada, Jean Chrétien. And Chrétien made an unprincipled attack against Cuba regarding so-called violation of human rights. So what did Cuba do? They invited myself and people from other countries whose governments criticized Cuba, for example, Argentina. We were invited to speak on the May 1st platform in Havana, Cuba, to give our views regarding Cuba and human rights. And of course, I was proud to do so. I was a bit nervous, but Fidel was in the crowd in front of me. That encouraged me. And after that, we demonstrated together and we met on the street corner. Now, what really impacted me mostly, he almost was in a very timid way, approached me to talk to me, very low key. And the second time was similar in 2001. The next year, I met him in a TV set of Cuban TV, where I was talking about my first book, the Elections and Democracy in Cuba, 1997-98. In that television program, I explained to the Cuban audience my very fruitful experience of presenting this book to an American audience and how the American audience was so open to the views with regards to Cuba's style of democracy. So he was just an ordinary person on this TV set. He came over to me to say, that is really interesting what you're doing. Congratulations, and keep up the work. But, he is very low key. He is a very ordinary person. And, so the first thing I was going to speak about was that he is transparent, whether he is speaking in May 1st in Havana or at the United Nations or in New York, for example, in Harlem or Washington, D.C. or Moscow. It's the same Fidel Castro. He doesn't have like two orientations or two looks. It's the same Fidel Castro. And the second thing that I was going to speak about was that there's so many characteristics, but the second one would be that Fidel Castro, what characterized him, he always had the courage to go against the mainstream narrative.
Mm.
People like you and I, we can appreciate that. He always,
Mhm.
and I was going to give the example, for example, the issue when Obama visited Havana in 2016, there was a lot of hype about it, a bit overhyped in my view from the press, how good it is that Obama's visiting Obama. And he wrote a very sarcastic article. As a committee, you would appreciate. Brother Obama, that was the title of his article, Brother Obama. And then he went on to say the truth about US imperialism, colonialism, and how we shouldn't have no illusions about US imperialism, again,
Yeah.
including Obama. And now the other example is going to give on the issue of Palestine. Now it is quite fashionable, almost 2 years into the genocide, people calling the Palestine another Holocaust. But Fidel Castro did that in 2014. He wrote an
Mhm.
article against the Palestinian Holocaust. And then, of course, the Angola, which is very important for the American audience. Cubans' support for Africa. Imagine sending troops
Yeah.
to Africa to defeat apartheid. So these were some of the points I was about to give regarding, in my view, his second feature, that is going against the tide, going against the narrative on any issue nationally and internationally.
I assume you continue to study Cuba. How is Cuba doing post Castro's, Fidel and Raul?
I think the situation is very difficult. I know Cuba very well. I've been there many times. I've written several books on it, and I'm in constant contact with my Cuban colleagues, all revolutionaries, but able to think, and all that. And I speak fluent Spanish, so I'm able to read the news there, the comments, and all that. The situation there is very complicated. As you know, the whole thing started way back in 1959 when the United States admitted the problem is there's no real opposition to Fidel Castro. We have to build an opposition by imposing sanctions and a blockade against Cuba to make the economy scream and force the Cuban people to rise up against the government. That has been going on.
And try to kill him a few hundred times, but yeah.
Yes, 355 times, something like that, amongst other points. So, the situation now is very difficult. This has been going on all the time. At the same time, I'd like to highlight a positive note. The opponents, the hardcore opponents of Fidel Castro in the United States, they're very pitiful. I don't know if you saw that interview by Tucker Carlson with Ted Cruz, Senator Ted Cruz, about a month ago.
Yeah, I saw the parts about Israel.
No, but here's what he said about Cuba. It's really a joke. He said, well, of course, I'm against communism. My parents were killed by the communists. I said, no, it's not true. My parents were killed by Batista before the communists came to power. These are the type of the mental pygmies that are opposed to Cuba. Then we have Marco Rubio. He's never been to Cuba. He has no idea what's happening there.
Yeah.
That is the funny or the sad part of it. But the situation there is very serious. Cuba has doesn't have a lot going for it. It's an island. Secondly, it has very few resources. One of them being beaches and sun, which is very much affected by the sanctions, and very few natural resources such as nickel. And also, they are very badly placed geographically in the eye of a storm. They have hurricanes every few years, which affects the economy. Like I was watching the news earlier today, they're talking about Hurricane Aaron. So I was, oh no, don't tell me it's going to hit Cuba again. So Cuba is not lucky. They are in a very difficult position. But at the same time, like, why are they so much against Cuba now, the United States, in 2025? Because even though it's devastated economically to a large extent, it still has a moral voice,
Yeah.
People talk about Cuba like Fidel Castro. He's known all over the world. People are celebrating his 99 years of life all over the world, many continents. Cuba has an important moral voice. That's what they do not like. It is not a small superpower. And in addition to that, you're going to talk about BRICS soon in your next segment. Cuba is also part of BRICS now as an associated member. So far from isolating Cuba, Cuba has succeeded in aligning itself with the overall movement in the global south and internationally against U.S. domination. So when Cuba speaks on an international stage, it carries weight, even if it's a small country, even though it's impoverished to a large extent as a result mainly of the economic blockade. That's their problem.
Yeah, I think they've done an impressive job considering what they're up against. You know, the largest empire the world has ever seen is trying to crush them, and they have these votes at the UN as to whether the embargo should continue. And every year, it's basically the U.S. and Israel say it should continue against all other countries. Well, thank you so much, Arnold, for being here. And I want to again remind people to check out your book. Is this the best site? Your website?
That's my current website. Yeah.
Yeah, ArnoldAugust.com.
Right.
So yeah, people should go there and follow your work and grab one of your books. And thank you again.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Pleasure. All right, that was great. Pleasure to talk with him. Sorry I didn't get to meet him in person because the U.S. is afraid of him entering the country. All right, I want to finish up on BRICS before we wrap things up for the day. And this is an article, and you know, before I was talking about how much Trump's tariff war has backfired already, sending India even closer to China as well as Russia, but that's also Ukraine proxy war connected. But here's from Responsible Statecraft talking about how far can BRICS and de-dollarization go. And it says, as the current chair of BRICS, Russia is pursuing a rather extensive agenda related to finance that includes enhancing the role of member countries in the international monetary and financial system and developing interbank cooperation and settlements in national currencies. Putin's mentioned that trade turnover between, he's talking about between them and China, trade turnover between the two countries in 2023 increased by some 25%, reaching $227 billion. He was also keen to underscore that 90% of bilateral trade between the two countries was conducted in rubles and yuan. Basically, Trump and the proxy war in Ukraine has sent countries, especially Russia, as far away from the U.S. dollar as possible because and it's not just Trump, but the U.S. has shown that we are not a legitimate broker. We're not going to stick to promises we make. We don't have your best interests at heart. Any deal we make, we are either going to rip up or try to renegotiate later. And countries are running for the hills from the U.S. dollar. It's not a stable place to be anymore. Chinese banks are under increasing pressure from the U.S. to stop funding these arrangements. It was probably no coincidence that during Putin's visit, it was announced that Beijing dumped a total of $53 billion of U.S. treasuries and agency bonds combined in the first quarter, according to calculations based on the latest data from the Department of Treasury. Belgium, often seen as a custodian of China's holdings, also disposed of $22 billion of treasuries during the same period. These figures underscore China's continuing commitment to de-dollarization. As of March 2024, over half of Chinese payments were settled in RMB or yuan, while 42.8% were settled in US dollars. China's gold reserves rose to 2,264 tons in the first quarter of 2024, up from 2,235 tons, and they're using gold as another form of de-dollarization. With the onset of the global de-dollarization trend, numerous countries have sped up diversifying their reserves by augmenting their gold holdings and adopting local currencies for international transactions. At the ASEAN Finance Ministers and Central Banks meeting in Indonesia in March, policymakers discussed cutting their reliance on the US dollar and the Japanese yen and the euro and moving to settlements in local currencies. In early April, Indian media widely reported that the Ministry of External Affairs had announced that India and Malaysia were starting to settle their trade in the Indian rupee. India already conducts most of its energy trade with Russia in rupees or rubles. And again, much of this stuff has been fast forwarded. This fleeing from the dollar has been fast forwarded by the actions of our sociopathic ruling elite, by the actions of Biden and the proxy war, by the actions of Trump. These things have all been put on fast forward. Until recently, nearly 100% of oil trading was conducted in dollars, petrodollar. However, in 2023, 1/5 of oil trades were reportedly conducted with non-dollar currencies. According to an article in NASDAQ.com, any such currency, if stabilized against the dollar, would weaken the power of U.S. sanctions by reducing the influence of the dollar globally, weakening the status of the dollar as a global currency, and mitigating risks associated with global volatility due to the lessening of dependence on the dollar. As more countries would seek alternatives to the dollar, this would only accelerate the trend towards de-dollarization. All signs are of a waning U.S. empire, a waning U.S. dollar, which is what allows the U.S. empire to exist. The BRICS has also created the BRICS Bank in 2015, now known as the New Development Bank. It mobilizes resources for infrastructure and sustainability development projects in the BRICS and other emerging market economies and developing countries. There is no doubting the commitment, particularly by China and Russia, to the creation of an alternative to the existing financial architecture underpinned as it is by the U.S. dollar. If successful, the addition of a competing system could prove particularly enticing to countries in the global south and would hopefully lead U.S. policymakers to exercise greater restraint regarding the use of sanctions as a foreign policy hammer. Now, in this article, he's focusing on sanctions, which it would impact sanctions greatly. The U.S. has sanctions on a third of all countries around the world and has sanctions on 60% of poor countries. And sanctions are economic war. And the U.S. is one of the only countries that has many sanctions at all on other countries. And a third of the world has been put at economic war with the United States via sanctions, and 60% of poor countries, because we really like to crush poor countries. They're one of the ones we like to crush the most. But along with decreasing the power of sanctions, of U.S. sanctions, it would just heavily decrease the power of the U.S. dollar and how many dollars the U.S. can print with the dollar continuing to have power, not hyperinflation. The monetary, the currency in the United States added 20% during just COVID, during just dumping all that money into Wall Street during COVID. So you can't do that unless you have a powerful currency. And we wouldn't have a powerful currency if it weren't for petrodollar and it being the global reserve currency. And those two things are linked. Anyway, one of the most important things going on is that these tariffs are backfiring in a big way. And tough to know if Trump really realizes. I think he just thinks that he will always be able to bend people to his will ultimately. And so he doesn't know any other way to behave. There's not like there is no operating procedure in Trump's brain that is ever like, maybe I should try working with them instead of trying to crush them. Like, that doesn't exist. And, if you want to dig a little deeper, why are people like Trump and so many other sociopaths at the top of the U.S. system? Because we have a system that rewards that. If you are not a sociopath, you are not really going to get very far in the U.S. system, but probably in capitalism in general. You might make an okay living or something, but you're not going to become the people at the top. I mean, if you look at the people at the top of the top, the Elon Musks and the Donald Trumps and the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Jeff Bezoses, they're all clear lunatics. I mean, they don't connect with humanity in a normal way. They're sociopaths. And that's how you get there. You got to steal and step on the throats of everyone around you. I mean, think about it. Here's just one little example of how you can know Elon Musk is a different brand of human being, if you can call him that, than you or me. He made his first billion, with when he was at PayPal selling his money, whatever his money processing service was, becoming part of PayPal. Then he leaves PayPal, has like $1 billion. He became a billionaire. You or I would have gone, oh my God, I am richer than any human being should ever be. I should follow some other passion. But not Musk. Musk has $1 billion. Well, how can I make that 100 billion? That's the next thought. It's a lunacy. It's a sociopathy. It's not the way you or I would ever behave. And of course, that's all the people at the top of this system. You're not there unless you behave that way. It is a system of criminals and sociopaths. Which are one and the same, I guess, but totally psychotic individuals. And we're seeing that. We're seeing that with Donald Trump right now. But I'm glad that you guys are here and that we're united as a community and that you all are working to change this world, as am I. We're each doing our part. And thank you so much. I do these live streams 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And I'd love for you just got to show up because you're not going to get the alerts. I am crazy suppressed. You just got to decide you're showing up. Put it in your calendar. The other thing is Unredacted Tonight. Comes out every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Put that in your calendar. And then the latest thing is I have a new column about the final accounting of the Syria hoax that allowed for our crushing of that country. And that's the latest column I put up at substack.com/@realleecamp. I hope you'll support this show at patreon.com/leecamp. Get all the perks, get my 2 ebooks, get my comedy specials, all when you sign up, and keep fighting.
Well, brother, I salute you, though, man. You're one of the few that bring together this tremendous artistic talent and still be in such deep solidarity with oppressed people.
It's an honor to be here because I'll tell you, Lee, you have one of the funniest shows on television, bar none.
It's an enormous pleasure to be here. While I was waiting, I was leafing through your wonderful book.
The same to you. I love your show. Be happy to come back anytime.
Lee, this is one of the great honors of my long career, just to be in the same earth with you.
I'm sure.
We're just so blinded. We have so many blinders on because our society doesn't want us to know things. And so it takes shows like your show, and
it is clearly designed to eradicate.
Hey, good to see you.
Hey, Jill, how are you? Julian, thanks for joining me. Honor to have you, brother.
Consumerism is a theory that people should behave this way to help each other. It's not.
Mr. George Galloway, thank you so much for joining me in these dark times.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
Thank you so much, Lee, for having me on. Keep fighting. Ha ha.